Bam! Hello, everybody. Bischoff here. Wise choices on 83weeks.com, our YouTube proposition for all of you. Going to try something different here today. I'm going to do a breakdown of last night's Dynamite, but I'm going to try to do it a little differently. Now, first, my mea culpa for today. That means it's on me. I am pretty certain last night when I set up my DVR, I had a meeting in town. So I set up my DVR before I left to record the show. I'm not going to blame it on the DVR. I'm not going to blame it on technology. I don't fade the heat like that. I'm not a bitch. Fess up. So I'm going to take the heat myself and probably screwed up the DVR because it didn't start picking up the show till about 7 o'clock. So I'm guessing that's why it was user error, because it just all of a sudden picked it up at 7. So that being said, what I'm going to do is break down the last half of the show, what I was able to see, the television presentation of it. Now, I actually did try, because I care about this stuff. I care about you, each and every one of you people. Seriously, I want this to be a great experience for everybody. So I tried to watch the matches back, because you can go back and watch highlights on YouTube, but it didn't really give me a feel from a producer's perspective. It didn't really give me the feel of the overall show because they were out of order, and it just took me out of the moment. So what I'm going to do is break down the last half of the show from a producer's perspective. I'm going to stay away from talking about the quality of the matches. That's very subjective. Well, all of this is subjective, but discussion about the quality of the matches and all that, I'll leave that to Dave Meltzer and the Dirt Sheet Mob. They can have all the fun they want with that. I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to approach this from the perspective of a television producer. Now, by that I mean, when Jason Hervey and I, my former business partner, had our own production company, Bischoff Hervey Entertainment, and we were extremely successful in creating from scratch, sometimes over a cocktail, more often than not, ideas would come into our respective minds, and we'd start massaging them and playing with them and building on them. And eventually, if we thought we had something really interesting and could put all the pieces together, back in Hollywood, they call that packaging, which includes talent and the right showrunner and all that kind of stuff. We would bring that package, and we would bring that presentation to a network. We would pitch it, and if we could get them to bite, we would end up selling that show, and we would also produce it. It's not like we would sell an idea to a network and then they would have their own production team produce it. We would sell the idea, and then we would be the producers of the show. And during that production process, primarily pre-production, you get a lot of notes, show notes, rough drafts of formats and rough drafts of anything that was related to that show. You would usually circulate that first to your own team, so your own team would have a chance to contribute their ideas, their input, their reactions to these various drafts. And that process of show notes continues all the way up and gets more intense as you get closer to the finished product in post-production. And it's a very long process. Post-production can take months, as opposed to the actual on-site production, which can take 30 days for an 8-episode series. So it's a very intense process, but along the way, you have other producers, people involved with the show. You have network executives who all want to have a voice and give you their ideas. All of these come in the form of show notes, and you have to respond to all of them, right? If you're managing your relationship well with your network. So that's how I'm going to approach this. I'm going to take the segments that I have, and I'm going to break them down, discuss them, not from I hated that finish perspective. That's what, dirt sheets are for. This is more about from a producer's perspective. And if I want to produce the absolute best show that I can, what do I see? What could we improve? What did we miss? What did we hit? And that's how I'm going to approach this. Now, I actually use my own formula: story, anticipation, reality, surprise, and action. Those are the 5 elements that I identified back in 2004-5, actually included in my first book, talked about the SARSA formula and how it had such a positive impact on the things that I was doing at the time. And I still apply that same formula today. So when I'm looking at something, whether it's wrestling or otherwise, I'm looking for the story elements and how well they're executed. I'm looking for anticipation. Where are the elements within what I'm seeing that to me check the anticipation box? Where's the reality? What elements within what I'm seeing are allowing me to suspend my disbelief and fully engage with what I'm watching, as opposed to going, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, that doesn't look like, you know what I mean? That's the reality element. Okay. Surprise speaks for itself. It's a critical element to any story or anything that you're watching. And of course, action as it relates to what we're watching. And in this case, it's professional wrestling, and action is a big part of it. So I'm going to approach this from that perspective, and I'm going to add one more element because of the nature of what we're doing here. And that's, I'm going to add the production notes into it as well. That could be lighting, it could be audio, it could be pacing, it could be any number of things that are really related more to the physical production of the show as opposed to the intellectual property of the show in terms of storytelling, characters, interviews, and promos. So that's the deal. Now, the other thing that's going to be different here, and I'm really excited about this because I fully intend, and I'm fully ready to commit to this, but I want to do more of this type of review of not just AEW, but of WWE shows, of TNA shows, perhaps even an NWA show here or there, but other shows that are coming up close to a pay-per-view or a big event, so that they're not necessarily only go-home shows, but in the weeks leading up to it, to really break them down to see if the elements that I feel are so valuable in terms of storytelling, story, anticipation, reality, surprise, and action, the SARSA formula, how it's being applied or not applied, and then comparing it to some of the right results that we'll end up getting eventually. So that's how I'm going to approach this. I'm going to ask you throughout this a series of questions. I really encourage super chats, but what we're going to do differently here today, so that I can do the best job I can do of answering all of those questions and I don't miss any, is I'm going to ask for questions about each segment, but we're going to hit the answers to those questions at the end. So that's the format or formula that I'm going to use today, and we're going to build upon it. I encourage you to let me know what you think of it, how I can improve it, what you liked, what you didn't like. And over the course of the next month or two, I'm going to be doing much more of these, and I'll fine tune it based on your input, and hopefully have a really cool show review format here on YouTube that's different than everybody else's, because I live to be different. All right. Without further ado, let me fire up my Google machine. I think Bully used to call it a Google machine. And I'll get to my notes. In the meantime, I do want to thank all of you for joining, because I've been excited about this. I've been looking forward to this. We're going to be doing more and more and more on YouTube. Our members, our exclusive members, are getting daily updates on the results of my 5-day water fast. I'm going to keep those comments for our exclusive members, but things are going well. Just to give you a hint, and tomorrow's the last day, so I'm kind of on a roll. Anyway, let's get down to business. Now, I picked up the show, I think it was right after 7 o'clock. So when the show picked up for me on DVR, I opened up with the Hook, Shibata, Samoa Joe segment in the backstage area. Now, I'm going to try to do this without being redundant, because some of my issues they repeat themselves over and over and over again. So when I run out of interesting ways to talk about the same thing, or different angles or perspectives to address the same things that I see over and over and over again, when I run out of ways to do that, I'm just going to call it out. It is what it is, and move on to something else, because I don't want to be redundant, or avoid it as much as possible. So on the promo, now here's one more disclaimer. Okay. I fully acknowledge that I don't watch Dynamite every week. And as a result of not watching Dynamite every week, some of my commentary, some of my perspective would normally be about the storytelling and all that. It's not fair for me to do that. I can talk about the story elements that I see as a new viewer. And I'm going to talk about that one more minute too before we get to the breakdown, because that's a really, really important point. I thought about it yesterday, but this is a good time to bring it up. One of my common issues and critiques that are derived from them is that AEW is doing absolutely no favors to themselves in terms of growing their audience. If you're in the television business, if you're a television producer, and that's all that Tony Khan is, and by that I mean, there's a lot of really, really successful people in Hollywood that are producers. So there's nothing wrong. I'm not minimizing a role as a producer, but it's nothing more complicated than that, folks. Tony Khan is producing television in exchange for a license fee. And at the core of that business is the pressure that's on you to grow your audience. If you're not growing in television, you're dying. And losing audience week after week after week after week over a consistent period of time is not a good sign. Now, why do I bring that up? Because I've talked about it before and over and over and over again. I bring it up because essentially I'm coming into this show today with you as a new viewer who hasn't been following for weeks and weeks and weeks, who doesn't live on the internet and following every comment and question and all that. I'm coming at this as I did last night with an opinion. I'm not going to suggest that I don't have one, or that there's not some bias in my perspective as a result of that. But from a storytelling perspective, I'm coming into this like a brand new viewer. And that's one of the reasons why I harp on this stuff, is because you have to not only serve the audience you already have, you also have to serve new viewers, because the way you grow your audience is by getting people who don't normally watch to watch. And you have to engage that audience as well. And it's an art. There's a fine line. You can go too far in one way or the other. Example, right now AEW has been, for the last 5 years I've been watching them, going too far satisfying an existing audience. Or you could call it preaching to the choir. Take your pick. It's the same thing. And when your focus is on serving your existing audience exclusively and not paying attention to the things you need to be aware of in order to grow your audience, you're going to slowly lose your audience. You're not going to grow. If you're lucky, you will maintain your audience. Generally, what you'll end up doing is losing audience. And that's where AEW is and has been for a long time. So that's why when I do comment on anything creative that I see, any elements of story that I see, I'm coming at it from the perspective of a brand new viewer, and whether it or not, it will create enough anticipation, that part of SARSA, to make me look forward to either next week or a pay-per-view or whatever. Okay, so enough of all that stuff. And as you can tell, I'm focusing on you, the audience, and trying to convey what I'm feeling and seeing here in just a moment. I'm not really watching too many of the questions, but I want you all to know that your super chats will be answered, along with a lot of your other questions that are coming up that aren't necessarily super chats. I want to answer as many questions as I can, but we're going to do it at the end of the episode, and we'll see how that flows and how you guys like that. Okay, so I'm picking it up with Hook, Shibata, and Joe. In terms of story, again, acknowledging I've been following it for weeks, but in terms of the story that I saw presented in this segment that is connected to what we hope to see it all in, I gave it a 3. Now, my scale is 1 to 10. I don't do stars, but I look at, I just graded on a scale of 1 to 10. I thought from a story perspective, in terms of that moment, that scene, I gave it a 3, primarily because Joe brought it home. He brought the intensity. He kind of tied it all together. It was a little loose, and I wasn't really sure where everybody was going. Again, as a new viewer, they weren't serving this viewer last night. It wasn't clear. The perspective of Hook and Shibata wasn't really clear to me. But when Joe came into the scene and kind of brought it all together, I kind of got with it, and it created interest. So there was enough story element in that segment to create at least interest on my part. Probably enough interest to want to see where it goes next week, and then make a decision as to whether or not I'd be really invested in the pay-per-view. Okay, in terms of anticipation, again, because of, I want to go back to story. I love the humor at the end, the little phone translator. You know, maybe they've done it before and I've never seen it, but I thought it was a cute little device, entertaining device. It's always fun when you can to add a little touch of humor, even though that was an intense segment with a serious kind of application with Joe, or serious element with Joe. And he did raise the intensity sufficiently to make me pay attention. So I think Joe did a great job. I think Hook's learning. he's learning. None of the stuff is easy or comes naturally. But I did like the little bit of humor at the end. Okay, in terms of anticipation, much because of what Joe did in that segment, I'm not like making my calendar. I'm not building a calendar around this particular matchup eventually, but I'm interested. It wasn't bad. It got my attention. Let's put it that way. Reality, not really applicable here. You know, part of reality is in the performance itself and how authentic and how organic it feels. Do I feel like I'm listening to someone who's memorizing a script, or do I feel like I'm listening to somebody who's really emoting and coming from the heart? Because professional wrestlers aren't trained method actors or actors, but they're performing much like an actor does, but they just don't have the training and the experience to do so. So anytime you get a performer like Joe, who is able to deliver, even though he's not an actor per se in the classical sense, traditional sense of the word, in terms of professional wrestling, he does a great job because he's very believable. He's authentic. It feels authentic. It doesn't feel like he's, first day on the job or reading a script. So I thought the authenticity that Joe delivered helped with the anticipation. It made me more interested in that regard. Reality, yeah, I just kind of touched on that a little bit. Same comment. There was no surprise. And sometimes, the SARSA formula isn't always 100% applicable. I used to tell people all the time, whenever I'd start developing a story or even a television project outside of wrestling, I used that SARSA formula as kind of a checkbox, because I knew that if I had 5 out of 5, if I could legitimately check all 5 of those boxes, I was literally printing money. 4 out of 5, it's a good project. It's probably going to be successful, but it's not going to change the world. 3 out of 5, okay, it's good, but it's more or less filler material. Anything less than 3 out of the 5 benchmarks, you're wasting your time. So that's kind of my approach to this. There was no surprise, so that gets a 0. Action, obviously not applicable because it was a backstage performance and there is no action in one of those. In terms of production, I gave it a 0, simply because it's such a stale, unnatural environment that there's no way that it can feel anything other than awkward. Now, one of the things that I think could have been done is, given the nature of the interview and the way they set it up, saying everybody's agreed, no violence. Okay, that's a new one, but good. But it would have been more believable and possibly more tense, and you would have had an element of anticipation if it would have been made clear at the very beginning, nobody's going to lay hands on each other. You're going to be subject to fines and termination. Cool. I think they may have done that, or maybe they did it on another match. I can't remember. But set the stage. Let the audience know that there's a set of rules for this promo. It makes it feel more important, number one. Like it's a big damn deal. It creates the perception or illusion, because that's what this all is at the end of the day. It's an illusion that is designed to make you feel something. That's all it is, folks. It's creating feelings, creating emotion. But to have had to set the stage so that everybody agreed, absolutely no physical contact at risk of something significant. And oh, by the way, you don't get to bring your posse out. Now, the minute you say that, from a psychology perspective, the audience, more or less, is going to go, oh, I wonder if they'll show up anyway, because it's wrestling, right? It's what you kind of would expect. So that's what I mean about you would have immediately set the stage. And there would be a way to artfully present that so that you're actually planting the seed that it could happen anyway and building the tension as a result. But other than that, man, that whole thing, I think, everybody did a decent job. Joe, of course, did a great job. But overall, production-wise, the way it was presented, primarily because it's in such just a horseshit sterile environment, I give it a nothing. All right, Toni Storm. What do you think? That's one that I really want to get your opinion on. And I'm going to do this at the end of every segment. I don't want you guys to agree with me just because you're here and you like following the YouTube and you like some of my controversial, salty shit, which I love doing. I love doing it. I'm having a blast, but I'm approaching this differently. And I'm really curious because I not only live to enlighten, I live to be enlightened. And that's the favor you all can do for me. So if you've got super chats or whatever, I want to hear what you think about my review of this particular segment, the Hook Shibata Samoa Joe segment. Do you agree with my perspective? Do you disagree with my perspective? Are there elements that you saw that perhaps I didn't? Because, we're all different. All right. Next one up, Toni Storm, Haley Cameron. I'm going to start out with story. I really wanted to give it something because I liked the presentation. I love the open. I love the black and white effect. It really adds to Toni Storm's character. They've been consistent with it, which I really enjoy. They're adding it, as part of the introduction with the black and white thing. So I was really excited about that. But yeah, there's got no story going on there. The only hint of a story element as a new viewer for this particular episode or for AEW in this particular episode, nothing really led me to going, wow, I can't wait to see that at the pay-per-view. The only thing I heard during the body of the match was in play-by-play. Tony Schiavone mentioned it, that Toni had a match with Serena Deeb at the pay-per-view. But beyond that, there was no reference to it at all. It was essentially a standalone match until, as we've seen, I don't know, 10,000 times over the course of the last 20 years, maybe half of that. But we've seen it all too often. Serena Deeb comes out and watches the match, presumably as some kind of distraction, but realistically more as a reminder, because there was nothing in the story of the body of the match that really moved this particular story forward towards the pay-per-view, other than a very bland, almost nonsensical appearance of Serena Deeb at the ring entrance on the stage. And she stood there and smiled the whole time. Same smile. No expression on her face whatsoever, other than just a goofy, phony smile. Now, I'm not criticizing the talent here, because talent, no matter whether it's television, movies, or anything else, are really reliant on directors in order to get the best out of a scene. And I'm not talking about the director in the truck necessarily. Probably in wrestling, it'd be more clear to call them agents or producers, but somebody should have been talking to Toni and said, okay, we're trying to use your appearance here during the body of this match to create anticipation. How can we do that? Perhaps coming out to the stage and then, I don't know, doing something, anything that would create a sense of jeopardy or intrigue. anything other than standing there smiling like a mannequin in a Macy's store. I didn't get that at all. It didn't do anything for me. The anticipation, I'm going to give it a 1 because Tony did mention it, and at least there's something there. But that's as far as I can go. And I'm not going to try to keep my opinion. Well, I can't because all this is my opinion, but I'm going to try to keep it as production oriented as possible and not editorializing other things. So, story gets a 0, anticipation gets a 1, reality, nothing. It's almost non-applicable here. This is just a match, nothing more, nothing less. It's just a match, probably designed more to get Haley Cameron over. A lot of references to her relationship with Saraya, and Saraya being her mentor and all that. That's what it looked like to me, but it actually did nothing to advance my interest in the pay-per-view coming up. The action, decent, not necessarily, in my opinion, subjective opinion, the action was sufficient. I didn't see anything that made me go, oh, wow, can't wait to the pay-per-view. But I didn't see anything that made me go, ugh, I don't want to watch this again either. So it was just kind of there. I'm going to give it a 1. Again, on the production notes, I'll repeat myself a little bit. Great entrance, awesome entrance. One of the better ones I've seen, certainly in AEW. But it just kind of is what it is. What are your thoughts? Am I missing the mark on this one? Is there something I didn't see? Again, super chat your ass off, folks. I'll be getting to all of them at the end of the show. But I'm really, really interested in your opinion on that one because this one to me was just All right, Backstage. Ospreay, Robert Storm, the Undisputed. It's pretty interesting. Again, my issue with it from a producer's perspective is backstage interviews, whether they're AEW, WWE, TNA, or anybody else, when they're on television, they suck because there's just no vibe. There's no energy. It's so unnatural. You got these guys that theoretically want to beat the hell out of each other. Supposedly there's this tension and all of that, and they're all kind of back there in a little box talking to each other in a very unnatural way. So I'm not going to try not to be redundant, but that bothers me a little bit. On the opposite side of that coin, great delivery from both Storm and Ospreay. I was impressed. Didn't feel scripted. Didn't feel like somebody else's words in the talent's mouth. So that part of it really impressed me. I gave that the story element because of the delivery and the authenticity in the delivery. I gave that an 8. And I was really impressed with both Storm and Ospreay in that regard. For this particular segment. In terms of anticipation, it got me up to about a 4. I should probably give it a higher because I will watch the pay-per-view. Actually, we're going to be doing a pre-game, post-game setup for the AEW pay-per-view on Sunday. So I will be watching, obviously, because I'm going to be making comments on it. But even if that were not the case and we weren't doing that live pre-game, post-game here on YouTube, I'd probably watch that one anyway. Definitely make an effort to check it out. On the reality, I gave it a 4 because, as I was mentioning early on, they really missed, from a production perspective, they completely ignored or missed the opportunity to build some tension that you could feel, right? By having everybody standing around there and Ospreay's outnumbered and shit should hit the fan, could hit the fan, maybe will hit the fan. By just having everybody standing around with their thumbs up their ass did nothing to really create anticipation or reality for me. So I gave reality, I gave it a 4, but it was really just coattailing off the intensity of the promo and the reality of the promo. Surprise, not applicable. There was no surprise there. Action, again, not applicable. So by default, this presentation only hit 3 out of 5. you only check 3 out of the 5 boxes. In my experience, both good and bad, 3 out of 5 is just okay. It's not good. You're not printing money. And that's the whole idea. Grow your audience, print money. That's why I love television so much, or used to. All right, where else? What else we got? Action is not applicable. And again, the production, I'd be redundant if I bring it up again. So do you agree with that? Do you agree with my perspective? Did the fact that they didn't create more tension in the scene hurt it overall? Do you agree with the quality of the delivery? Did it feel authentic to you? I'll be really curious about that one. But of what I did see of the show, the last half of it, this was probably my favorite part. Okay, contracts. First of all, contract signings almost always suck. I just don't like them. Maybe it's because I've done too many of them and it's really hard to create the level of anticipation and tension. When you do it well, when there's a sufficient backstory and you've built the tension over the course of a couple of weeks sufficiently to create real tension and real anticipation, then a press conference can work if you've set the stage and there's the possibility that something could explode. Now, I know something exploded at the end of this, and we'll cover that in a minute, but the fact that, in my opinion, they didn't adequately build the arc and hit the plot points necessary during Act 1 and in the midst of Act 2 to make me really think, boy, there's something good is going to happen here. Something big is going to happen here. It just felt like, eh. So on the story side of this, adequate job trying to fill in some backstory. I think Willow did a good job, a decent and adequate job of sharing her perspective, giving us a little bit of an insight as to how she feels and what her motivation is, because that's key to all of this. Any story, movie, television, film, books, TV commercials, whatever the fuck it is, there has to be motivation. And a lot of what I see, or have seen, I should say, in AEW, motivation is just like, well, it's a dream match. Well, they have history. They wrestled the other 3 times in Ring of Honor. Who gives a fuck? It's a tree that falls in the forest and no motherfuckers have ever heard it. That's not building a story. That is a lame excuse for a match. And we're going to talk more about lame excuses for matches in just a minute. Dax. Oh, we're going to have fun with that. There's some fun coming up. Don't get me wrong. My producer hat doesn't prevent me from having fun. Trust me. All right, back to the contract signing. Anticipation, I actually gave this one a 5. I thought everything else in this interview was pretty flat at best, but it did, because of the heat at the finish, the heat at the end, it interested me. I think they checked the anticipation box. Let's put it that way. Reality, absolute 0. I mean, there was nothing authentic about this. In fact, one of the other notes I have here, if you want an example, a perfect example of what is meant by the term less is more, as it's applied to television, and in this case, professional wrestling, go back and rewatch this segment. And again, I can't critique the talent because the talent is being produced and directed. This is a perfect example, folks, of less could be so much more valuable than more. By that, I mean Willow just doesn't have the experience to go out there and carry as much dialogue as she did. If her dialogue would have been cut by 70%, 60% at the very least, and she delivered that same message with less narrative, it would have made it much, much, much more impactful. But because she was just out there filibustering, because I guess talent still believes that the more camera time you get and the more mic time you get, the better it is. That's only true if you're really experienced and have developed a great skill with narrative, holding a mic. And Willow does not have that experience or that skill yet. I saw indications that perhaps she could at some point, but right now, absolutely not. And I think allowing her, whether it was her choice or whoever the producer was or whoever her writer was, giving that person that much dialogue, knowing, you should know, should pay attention and be honest, knowing that she's really not there yet, all that does is expose her for not being as good as she needs to be in the role she's in. So protect your talent, producers, agents, whatever you want to call them, and writers, and don't burden them with more dialogue than their abilities would allow them to do well. Less is more. Same with Mercedes. Exact same comment. Now, I will note, of the interviews that I've seen from Mercedes since she arrived in AEW, this was better than what I've seen in the past. I, for one, know this is commentary about the character, and I said I'm not going to do it too much or at all, but I'm going to break my own rule here. That Mercedes character, from what I've seen so far, is as one-dimensional as one-dimensional can get. There's got to be some like wacky math formula that it will allow you to get to a number that makes this more interesting than what it really is. I'm not saying that right. I'm not making my point, but my point is this was better than what I've seen, but how you get to be anything less than one-dimensional without a really cool math formula, I don't know, but that's what this is. That character, the way she's presenting herself, number one, it's not over. You can pipe in all the CEO, as part of the music you want. The audience is not getting with it. Now, there were less than 4,000 people in that arena last night, based on what I've seen from WrestleTix. Anyway, a couple hours before the show, there was less than 4,000 people in that arena. So that makes it tough. There's just not a lot of energy there. But that crowd was flat. They're not buying that character, in my opinion. And that is a producer's note. Because if your characters aren't working, because there's no depth to those characters, you've got a problem. And I'm not buying it. I don't think anybody else is either. All right. Where are we? Story surprise. I'm going to give it a 1 because the finish was well. The finish to that interview or that contract signing was fairly well executed. Putting Mercedes to the table, I think, surprised everybody. I don't think anybody expected to see that. So I want to acknowledge that at least they checked the box, but barely. Action, again, I'm going to give you the execution. I gave it a 2. I'm going to bump it up a little bit. I'm going to give that a 4 because I do think the execution of the finish to that contract signing, it was interesting. The crowd reacted. It was a big moment. So I'm going to bump that up, give it a 4. Production-wise, oh, by the way, did Willow refer to the monitor as a Titantron? That sounds familiar. Why would it sound familiar? Oh, because that's what WWF used to call it way back in the day. I thought that was a little weird, that AEW has a Titantron. Anyway, doesn't really matter. It's just a little funny note that I made to myself because I'm basically a pretty funny guy. Once you get to know me, like it takes a while to see the brilliance in my humor. But when you do, you'll appreciate it. So stick with me. It'll get better, I promise. All right, so production, I gave that a 2. Again, agree, disagree. What am I missing? Maybe I'm missing something. I'm really anxious to learn. I want to be enlightened. So let me know. Chat me up. Super chat me up. Send me an email. Send me something on Twitter. Bischoff. Whatever you want to do. And if you're a member of 83 Weeks and you designate your membership in 83 weeks and you send me something on social media, you go to the top of the list of people that I will respond to. And if you follow me on social media, you know that I do interact quite a bit on social media. I do engage, sometimes in a fun way, sometimes in a more interesting way. All right, now to the main event, and this is the one I'm looking for. And Super Dave, I know that Dax put up a tweet or a Twix or an X post or whatever the frick we want to call them now. Let's take a look at that before we get into this, because it kind of sets the stage. Can't wait for paid podcasters to complain and ask, where's the story? Interesting that Dax didn't necessarily call me out specifically, but is still convinced that the only reason that anybody that does a podcast is critical of him or AEW is because we're paid. In other words, we wouldn't have the opinions we have if we weren't paid, would we? Unfortunately, Dax, I think if you look at the rest of the comments on your post, as well as many others, and listen to people that you should be listening to, which is your audience, by the way, or the audience you wish you had, most would agree with a lot of the negative or critiques that we have here. But Dax, unfortunately, is in this delusional state of mind where he's convinced himself and is trying to convince other delusional people in their basement, whatever, that the only reason people like me or Bully or Jim Cornette or anybody else that does it is criticizing AEW is because we're getting paid by WWE. You dipshit. You're killing your own character. All right, enough of that. We'll have some more fun with Dax here in just a few minutes. Story. I gave it a 3, primarily because I think Tony did a great job. Tony Schiavone did a good job, not a great job, a good job of tying in All In, what we anticipated All In, and putting the baby faces in jeopardy. Risk of injury. That's the reason for everybody's looking forward to this match, is Okada and the Elite to have an opportunity to inflict some damage before the pay-per-view. By the way, that story element is about as old. It's got to be 40 years that I've been watching variations of that same element. So, and it's not that it's not appropriate or it's not a valuable sometimes tool, but in and of itself, it's fairly lukewarm at best. But Tony did do it, and he did remind me that there are implications as a result of this match, and therefore there's a reason, there's a why, there's a premise at least for the match to happen, and I appreciate that. It's not just something, thrown together, so to speak. On the other hand, there was no story to this match other than they have history in Ring of Honor. Who gives a flying fuck? It doesn't matter. That is not a story. That's an excuse for a story. That being said, Tony, I think, in play-by-play, and I want to talk a little bit more about color and play-by-play because I've got some issues there at the end of all this. But Tony did an adequate job of tying it all together and making chicken salad chicken salad out of basically chicken shit, because other than the fact that they have history in Ring of Honor, there was no fucking reason to put this match together. All right. Anticipation. I think there was good heat at the end. I'm going to talk more about the finish in a minute when we get to production, but I'm going to give it a 4. At a 4, whether I was reviewing the pay-per-view or not, I would probably make a point to, if not watch it live, definitely check out a replay. I'm not going to schedule my life around it. I'm not going to miss a good opportunity to take my wife out to dinner or to spend some time with my kids if that opportunity was there, or even to take my dog for a nice walk if the weather's great, decide to go hike up into the mountains. I would do that in DVR, and I would do a better job. I would go back and watch it after the fact. So that's how I feel about that. Surprise. There was no reality to it at all. It just was what it was. The surprise with Darby got me. I gave that a 7. Keep in mind, I probably wouldn't give a 10 out very often, maybe a couple times a year. And when I say give a 10, I don't mean that I expect you people to agree with it or anybody else to agree with it. It's just how I view things if I was analyzing my own show and how I would determine if I wanted to change something or improve something or eliminate something. So in terms of surprise, definitely well executed. Hats off. Crowd really reacted, which is the only thing that I really saw that crowd of 36 or 3,800 people react to the way you would hope to see an audience react to a 2-hour wrestling show leading into a pay-per-view. It did get a great reaction. So kudos to the team, talent, producers, everybody involved. And you got a 7 out of that one, and that's pretty good. Action. All right. I'm going to try to be objective, but I'm also going to be honest. I know we've been hearing about the greatest tag team in a long time or ever or whatever. I'm not going to comment on that because I haven't watched enough of these two, Dax and Cash, together as a tag team to comment too much on that. But as a singles performer, this was about as average can get. Now, I am going to comment on the quality of the match and the presentation in this performance, particularly since everybody's pushing so hard about the in-ring skill of Dax Harwood. And someone who's a good friend and whose opinion I value very much, I was speaking to right before we went live and said that, the Revival in WWE, they were really well produced. They did look like they could be considered one of the best tag teams. Not the best, Bully. Not the best, Bully. If I had a crayon and a piece of paper, I'd draw a picture of it. But when they were in WWE, Revival was a really, really great looking team. Since they arrived in AEW, they've become pretty average. And Dax in this singles performance was very average. He was slow. It was a plodding kind of a pace, which is okay if it's a match where the audience is expecting the old Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard style of a match, Ric Flair, where there's not a lot of high flying, not a million false finishes, nobody's doing suicidal shit. You're just out there wrestling. And I like that style. It's one of the reasons I was a fan of FTR in the very beginning before Dax lost his shit, turned into such a pussy online. But this presentation, it was very average. And if you see something that I didn't see, if your perspective is different, I really want you to tell me about it because I just don't see it. Dax has he sells two different ways: dead or nothing at all. If you're listening, and I'm probably sure you will be because clearly you're obsessed, but if you're going to if you're going to model yourself after someone like Arn Anderson, which I would encourage you to do, because Arn was one of the best, pay attention to the fact that Arn could sell. Like, really sell. I don't care how tough your offense is. I don't care about your sharpshooter. And by the way, the couple attempts, and I know the story in the match, I'm digressing here a little bit, but the story in the match was, will Dax get the sharpshooter on because that's his finish? Nothing wrong with that idea. But in terms of the execution during the body of this match, there were 3 or 4 times there where Dax went for the figure 4 and Okada was able to get out of it. But you've got to make that look good too. That's a little detail, right? Great television is nothing more than doing a great job with little details. And it all comes together in kind of a magic performance. Well, as Dax is going in is trying to get that figure four sharpshooter, Okada's able to get out of it. But that portion of that exchange was so awkward and unbelievable. Dax looked like a monkey trying to fuck a football. It just didn't look good. I don't know. It's a little thing, but it really was noticeable to me. And if you go back and watch that, you'll see what I'm talking about. And it's those little things that separate the greats from the professionals to the workers. Anybody can be a worker. I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow on 83 Weeks. The difference between being a professional wrestler and a worker, because there's a big difference. And I just learned this today. So it's pretty cool. But this is a perfect example of that. Dax is a worker who happens to engage in professional wrestling as opposed to a professional who is working. More on that tomorrow. Anyway, yeah, this left me really flat. I didn't see. Let me go. My computer went to sleep on me here, so bear with me. Ant Evans, my Sherpa guidesman here on YouTube, told me not to worry about the overall quality of the production. The YouTube audience wants to see authenticity. They want to feel like they're sitting across the table from you, having a sandwich or a beer or whatever. Well, that's what's going on right now because I'm a high-tech redneck, and sometimes my technology gets away from me, as it did last night. All right, so I left off at surprise. I gave that a 7. In terms of action, again, that's what I've been talking about. It's very basic, very slow, very plotting. And like I said, Dax has 2 gears when it comes to selling. Dead and none. So do your homework, Dax. Go back, watch some videotape, improve your game. Quit spending so much time on Twitter bitching about what people say about you. And by the way, Dax, did anybody come up to you last night? Because I know this was a big deal for you in WWE. Did anybody come up to you last night and thank you for the house? I bet not. Not with 3,800 people. You can't even sell out a 4,000-seat arena. By the way, why does EW go all the way to frickin' Washington, across the country, to draw 3,800 people for a live television show? But I digress. I'm just wondering, Dax, did anybody come up to you and thank you? It was the main event. You and Okada. Anybody come up and say thank you for the house? Probably not. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm done with this portion of my review. Again, I will apologize profusely for being the high-tech redneck that I can be sometime and failing to set my DVR up appropriately. But I want you to know I could have faked it. I could have gone to YouTube and watched the highlight reels, and I could have cobbled it together and convinced you all that I actually did watch the entire show, but I didn't. You may not like what I say, but I don't lie to you. That I don't do. So, yep, I fucked up, but I'm only covering half the show, but I had fun doing it, and it's a great way for me to kind of get my feet wet with this format. But I really want to know what you think. Do you like this format? How can I prove it? How can I make it better? But more importantly, let's get to the questions, because this is the fun part of the show. This can be a show all by itself. So, Super Dave, what do we got? Mark K. It's a shame Copeland and Black aren't cutting promos face-to-face. You know, that thing that builds audience interest and puts butts in seats and makes the paying customer purchase the pay-per-view. Apathy Elite Wrestling. I did happen to watch. I did go to YouTube because originally I thought, well, maybe I can get a feel for the first half of the show by watching the highlight reel. But after looking at a couple of the matches that I did see highlight reels on YouTube, it didn't give me the feel that I needed to really address the story, anticipation, reality, surprise, and action, because a lot of that is elements that sometimes you don't see in a highlight reel. So I did see Copeland and Black. I did see the ambush. I agree with you because I have been around Malachi Black. I do have a sense for what he's capable of doing. I've spent a lot of time around Adam Copeland. I've worked with him I certainly know what he's capable of doing. And I absolutely agree with you that what's missing here is that tension. There's heat. Steal a man's wedding ring. That's heat. But it's not the same as the tension you can build. You know what I learned? Somebody told me this one time, and it was a note that I made to myself to remember it. It's like if you watch an old Western or even a new one, you get that moment where the gunfight's going to happen at noon. And everybody knows that everybody in town is peeping through the windows. They're looking over the top of the hitching post, hiding behind whatever they can hide behind because they know there's going to be a gunfight, but they want to watch. There's anticipation. They know what the story is between the two guys that are going to shoot at each other, but there's that anticipation. There's that buildup. What's going to happen? And when you watch those gunfights at the OK Corral or whatever, take a look at the movie Tombstone, not necessarily a contemporary movie, but one of the best Westerns ever. That moment when Wyatt Earp and everybody else were coming out looking for the guys they were going to get into a gunfight with, the Cowboys, as they called themselves as a group. Man, they did such a great job building that tension. And it's when everybody's coming together and they just squeeze every ounce of anticipation out of that scene by watching everybody's eyes and watching to see how close their hands are getting to the gun, who's going to draw first. They cut to people watching through the windows and you can see the anticipation in their eyes. People are really now getting ready to take cover because they know the moment of truth is about to fucking come. Somebody going to get shot and they don't want it to be them. That's the moment. They don't just come out there and shoot each other. There's no fun in that. You got to build the drama and the anticipation. And I think bringing, as Mark Kay is putting out here, bringing Copeland and Black together could be more interesting and build more anticipation than a hot angle, which is usually, what is that? It's a justification for a match, not necessarily a plot point. So I agree with you, Mark. A great question. I appreciate you guys. You are an enlightened group of mucker fathers. I love that. What do you got, Super Dave? Mr. Team Bring It. Are there any wrestlers in AEW that you think could have been main event talent in WCW? Well, keep up the good work. Thank you, Mr. Team Bring It. Yeah, there's, my issues with AEW have nothing to do with talent. They got great talent. They have too much great talent. They don't know what to do with it. It's kind of going to waste and dying on the vine, but that's a personal issue with the talent, not necessarily with me as a viewer. So my issue is not with the talent. My issue is with lack of vision, lack of strategy, no tactics, lame at best if there are any, and just horrible creative and lack of storytelling. Those are my issues, not talent. But, just off the top of my head, if I think about it, MJF, I'd fight a mucker father for a shot to sign MJF. He's definitely got the talent. I like Toni Storm. I think she needs to be produced better. I think there's a lot of talent there. Her character is great. She's got a good feel for her character. But she needs to be produced properly. Her direction, she either has a great instinct and is directing herself, or she's being directed pretty well. But story-wise, just kind of flat. But as a character, definitely would have my eyes on her. And there are others. I'm going to be leaving people out, I know, but I'm not here to put over talent. I'm here to break down this show. But that's a great question, and there definitely are people that I would think be quality, potentially main event material back in the day. All right, Super Dave. Instagram, a wrestling story. Love this guy. Great take. A lot of great input. Thank you very much. Follow him on Twitter because he does have such a great take. Your thoughts on the Elite overshadowing Swerve? And that's a great question. It's one of the reasons I love Instagram, a wrestling historian. I did watch the Swerve match on YouTube. I didn't want to break it down and comment on it because I just don't think that would be fair to everybody involved, you guys as viewers here and part of my audience, and not fair to AEW because that's a great way to look at the show. But I find it odd that you've got a brand new world heavyweight champion, first black heavyweight champion in AEW, talented guy, very accomplished. And not only did he get that championship opportunity late in the game, per my podcast partner, Conrad Thompson, his time kind of came and went, should have been done a long time ago, but he's being positioned horribly. All of the focus is on Elite. It's your main event. It's your pay-per-view. Well, billed as. In terms of A story, it's the A story and the B story. And that does such a disservice to your world heavyweight champion. I'm really disappointed. I don't know Swerve. I don't think I've ever met him. If I had, it was very, very briefly. So I'm not advocating for him because of a personal relationship. That's my point. I'm just saying, here's a guy that I think deserves the opportunity to be world heavyweight champion, but he's what's that? I'm trying to think of a movie where there's a phrase in a movie. I can't think of it. Don't want to waste any more time, but they're putting baby in the corner. There it is. Dirty Dancing. They're putting baby in the corner with Swerve. And only those of you that have ever watched that movie will get any idea what I'm trying to say here. But from the moment he won that championship, and a big celebration, hey, everybody's excited. The following week, it was like an afterthought. He opened up a show in a match that meant absolutely nothing with somebody that probably 90% of the wrestling audience in America has never seen before or heard of. Yay. Way to get your talent over, Tony. Way to make your title important, Tony. Speaking of titles, I saw something on, who sent it to me? Conrad. I think Conrad sent it to me. I'm going to have to look at it because it's really, really appropriate for this. Here, give me a second, guys. Don't leave me. Think of some good questions. Can I find it? I don't want to take all day. No, I can't find it. But put the question back up again, Super Dave, if you would, please, sir. Kind of lost my train of thought, as I often do. All right, never mind. We can move on to the next question. How's that? Because I definitely lost my train of thought. What do we got, Super Dave? Kevin LaRose, do you think it's a bad look for AEW to allow their wrestlers' office, the DeRosa, Mark Henry, etc., to be on podcasts discussing WWE or reviewing WWE shows, PLEs, and WrestleMania? No, I don't. Here's my issue, Kevin. One of many issues. The reason I came out almost 2.5, 3 years ago and said, Tony, shut up and wrestle. Quit talking about AEW. Quit taking shots at AEW. Quit trying to convince the audience that you're a better product than AEW. Just quit. You're not in the fight. You're not going head to head. You're not competing for market share. If you're not competing for market share, then why in the world are you creating this division amongst the wrestling audience and basically shitting on WWE fans in the process? That's not the way to endear yourself to the broader wrestling audience, going back to building an audience. You're alienating 75% of them, 70% of them, because Tony Khan, believe it or not, you're such an analytical, statistical kind of math guy. That's your claim to fame, right? Data analyst, something like that. Does it occur to you that you really only have about 30% of the audience that WWE has, maybe 40. So since you can't compete for market share and you're not competing for market share, why create the division in the audience and alienate them and create, Tony Khan, as you have done so effectively, along with your geek buddy Dave Meltzer, you've created the tribalism that you're now whining like a bitch about. You created it by taking shots at WWE and constantly trying to convince yourself that you're a better product. Congratulations. You've earned it. You have a divided audience, and a very loud, vociferous one at that. But back to the question, Kevin LaRose asked, do I think it's a bad idea to have them do it? No, I think they should do more of it. I think they should encourage people who are part of AEW to acknowledge the other brand, to put it over, but at the same time, distinguish it, if you can, from your product. So in other words, instead of alienating 60 or 70% of the audience who definitely are WWE fans, and by shitting on WWE, you're shitting by default on the fans that watch them and are committed to them. Rather than doing that, just acknowledge them for what they do and focus on the alternative, if you were truly an alternative, that your product is. Tony would have been able to maintain his goodwill as he would if he encouraged Kevin LaRosa, if he encouraged more discussion of WWE, embrace it. They're in the same business you are. You want the business to be healthier. Well, you should want the business to be healthier. You should want the business to grow. And the best way to do that is to put over the superior product, but let the audience know you've got an alternative that you're proud of. That's how you create goodwill. That's how you get WWE audience or your competitor's audience, because you're competing in your own mind. But that's the way the brand, you're the challenger brand. Well, the way the challenger brand builds goodwill is not by shitting on the people that enjoy the product, but by putting it over, or at least acknowledging it without being negative, but more importantly, convincing, or along the way, convincing your audience that you do indeed actually have an alternative that is different than WWE, without taking a shit on them. That way you've got 100% of the goodwill of the audience, as opposed to 30 or 40% of the audience that drinks your Kool-Aid and believes your bullshit. Simple formula, really. So I hope that, Kevin, I know that probably over-answered your question, but I do thank you for asking it. All right, Super Dave, what do we got? Josh Matlock, Toni Storm is one of the best gimmies going, and she's almost always great in her promos. The story with her and Deebs isn't good, but Storm is great on her part. I agree. And that's why it's not a talent issue. And I don't know, I don't have an opinion of Serena Deeb's abilities. I don't know how good she is on a mic or not good she is on a mic. But guess what? You determine that these challenges exist, and you find creative ways to work around them and overcome them. That's where the art comes in. There's no art. There's no creativity in saying, okay, Serena, you're really good in the ring, but since you suck on the mic, we're just going to have you come out and smile like a fucking mannequin. That's not art. There's no creative talent in that. There's no attempt to camouflage a weakness. It's just go out there and smile. Like that's going to do anything? Like people at home are going to go, oh, honey, come here. You're going to want to watch this. Serena's, she's standing on the ring. Check this. Come here, hon. Come here. I know. Put down the tequila. Come on over here and watch this with me. Okay, babe. Check this out. See Serena? See her? She's up on the stage. Are you kidding me? This is going to be great. I can't wait for this paper. You going to watch it with me? Yes, I'll bring tequila. All right. Check it out. Here she comes. She's still smiling. All right, fuck it. Go have a cocktail. What are we doing here? But I agree. Toni Storm, I love her. I love I love what Mike, I'm assuming it's Mike Mansouri. I have a ton of respect for Mike Mansouri. He's a director in the truck, one of the more creative guys I've ever been around. Didn't get a chance to work with him as much as I wished I would have, but clearly understands and gets it. He's probably swimming upstream, I'm guessing, based on everything else that I've seen and heard from people that are there. But nonetheless, I see a little Mike Mansouri in this character, in the way it's presented. And he's doing a great job. And so is Toni Storm. Definitely agree. All right. What else we got? Wise guy. Hook is okay, but tries to be a badass too much. Too much. It's like the Dom gimmick done seriously. Nobody is scared of a 23-year-old. I get what you're saying. He's young. He's learning. He's learning in an environment that's going to be tough to make progress in, just because of the nature of what's going on there. I think when young talent, regardless of how much potential they have, tries too hard because they're not given proper direction, or they're being produced in a way that allows the talent to expose their own weaknesses, that's where the art comes in. That's where the experience comes in. And I agree with you on this particular promo. I have seen other promos, one in particular that Hook did with Samoa Joe months ago, that I thought was fucking awesome. And I immediately went to Twix and put it over like a mucker feather because it was that good. But in that particular promo, Hook was very understated. His character got over with me, at least, because you could feel that there was something burning and building inside of Hook, and he was trying his best to suppress it. That created a sense of inner turmoil and tension. And he did it so well that I was convinced that this guy's going to be in a rocket ship real soon, because that's a hard thing to achieve. If you're not an experienced actor or a professional wrestler that's had the privilege and the opportunity to be directed by someone that has a really good feel to how to make a promo feel believable. And there aren't many people out there that know how to do it or willing to teach it. It's the best way to say it. But I saw that in Hook's promo with Samoa Joe a while back. What I saw on this one, on this particular promo, and why I agree with you, is because whoever was producing Hook in this promo allowed him to try too hard. He was pushing his character too hard so that it passed the believability threshold and just got into awkward. Had Dax or the producer or the director that was directing him at the time brought him back to a little bit more of that understated, dangerous, edgy, brooding character that I saw with Samoa Joe, that would have worked. But instead, he overplayed his opportunity, probably went a little too far, and exposed himself for his lack of experience in the process. Notice that I didn't say lack of potential. There's a difference. I think Hook has a tremendous amount of potential. He's a very unique character. He's different than a lot of other characters. Does he have the size? No. Does it matter? Not really. If you've got a great character and you're being directed and produced properly and you're learning properly, you can take advantage of the fact that, I don't know, Rey Mysterio, there was a lot of other things that got Rey Mysterio over, but being the underdog is not a bad thing in professional wrestling. And learning how to build upon that is a fucking awesome thing. All right, next question. Josh Matlock, Mercedes taking her first bump was great. I agree. And there were some good lines, but a lot of the promos were just repeats of what's already been said over and over and over again. The bump was cool. I agree. It's pretty much what I I guess, trying to say, or maybe came close to saying. The finish was good. It was well executed. Seeing her take that bump was important. But the dialogue, fuck. Again, not the talent's fault. The way that promo was constructed, whether it was by my good friend, Jen Pepperman, who is a writer in AEW, from my understanding, I don't know that it's accurate or not, Mercedes actually made sure she brought Jen Pepperman from the WWE over to AEW because Jen and Mercedes worked together in WWE and therefore had a good relationship. At least that's my understanding. I'm not testifying to a fact. I'm just telling you what I've been led to believe, and it kind of makes sense. You've got at some point to recognize that less is more with someone who isn't really very good with a mic in her hand, and that is Mercedes not very good. Maybe she's got some potential. Maybe she'll get there. But there's a reason you didn't see a lot of promos out of her in WWE, yet she got over like a mugger father, right? Because they protected her from herself. That's what your ultimately Tony Khan's job is, if he's really, truly the head of creative, beyond just the title. The head, in many cases, it's in the movie business, television business, your director really has the final say. Well, actually, the network or the studio has the final say. But up until that point, your director, if it's a movie or television show, calls the shots. In some cases, television, it can be an executive producer when the titles actually mean something and they're not just a vanity title, which it happens to be the case all the times in movies and television shows. But somebody should acknowledge that this young lady, as talented as she is in so many other areas, just isn't very talented when it comes to narrative, and protect her. Don't allow her to overexpose herself. Don't give her the creative control, whether it's contractual or implied, inferred. Don't allow her to demand more dialogue because either she thinks she's good at it or because she thinks it'll get her more over. She's her own worst enemy if she believes that the more she talks, the better the better off she is, because it's exactly the opposite. So we are, man, same page. You and me, Josh, same freaking page. This is fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am, because I'm actually having a blast, and I appreciate you guys being with us. Mark K. Look at Mark, all dapper in his suit. I like that. I'm going to be wearing my WWE suits. Let me answer. I'm going to get to the question, and I'll tell you about this. Stone Cold's injury began in June 96. 2 years later, he's champ with hell yeah chance during the journey. Does the same apply to Swerve? Thanks, Eric. I don't know, man. We'll watch. I haven't watched enough of. I've seen clips of Swerve. I saw clips of his first match in AEW after winning the championship. So I've seen clips and highlights and matches, but I haven't watched enough yet to get a feel for whether the audience is really behind Swerve at this point or not. Based on what I saw today on YouTube, the highlight reel from last night's show, he's got a long way to go, and it's not his fault. Absolutely not his fault. Right now, in my opinion, intentionally or not, and I believe it's not, Swerve is being set up to fail, and that's a damn shame. It's a damn shame for the belt, in terms of creating value and making something feel important. They're diminishing it, the belt, the championship, one of the highest stakes, presumably, in the company, by making his matches an afterthought and making him the C story as opposed to the A and B story, because that is exactly what's happening. The way the shows are being formatted, the lack of story and build-up going into his matches, the fact that he's being placed in the middle of a show instead of in a main event position, all are subtle, sometimes almost invisible signals to the audience that this don't mean shit. Something else does, but this is just, we're gonna check the box, folks, but that's it. And that's really doing Swerve and the championship a real disservice, in my humble, okay, it's not humble, fuck it, in my opinion. There you go. Thanks for the question, though, Mark. Appreciate it very much. Okay, we have time for a couple more. I should ask before we go on, Super Dave, how many more super chats do we have?
We have about 4 more super chats, and then we have questions from our live audience.
All right, well, let's get to the 4 super chats, and then we'll jump in and get to the live audience.
Gotcha.
And on deck we have. I'm going to leave Ilyas Sandman. That's a cool name. I wish I could pronounce it. I'm sorry. Hi, Eric. What's stopping Tony Khan from hiring a couple good writers to support these dream matches and provide good backstory? So no in-ring action, just stories. No. Don't get me wrong. Perhaps I'm not interpreting your question wrong or reading your question right. I should say. First of all, what's stopping Tony Khan from hiring good writers? Jen Pepperman, as I referenced, I worked with her for a brief period of time in WWE. She's won Emmys in daytime television, which are soap operas, which are what? Nothing more than female wrestling. Not females wrestling, but if wrestling is a male soap operas are a female soap opera. In the end of the day, the thing that they most have in common is they're both episodic storytelling formats. That's how they grow and survive. Jen is one of the best at it, and she's in AEW. We didn't even have to hire anybody. You would just have to give somebody enough latitude to do what they're good at doing and not getting their way with silly ass freaking dream matches popping up out of the ground every 5 minutes, or letting the rest of the talent on a show decide for themselves what their stories are and what they'll do and what they won't do. Because if you don't know that that's going on, or you don't believe it's going on, it's because you're not talking to anybody that's willing to tell you the truth who's really there. I do. And there is a strong element from someone who is guilty of it himself, who was guilty of it himself, of letting the students run the class. It's the best way I can say it. So nothing stopping him at all. It would help dramatically. I don't think there's a better example. Sandman, I'm going to cut your name in half, Sandman. You look at WWE, you look at the formula in WWE, arguably what's working. They're shattering records everywhere they go. They're breaking new ground everywhere they go. Their audience is growing. Not just their television audience, but their global audience is growing. They're creating more business-to-business opportunities in the wrestling industry than has ever existed before. And it's based on a formula of telling great stories with great characters, not fucking dream matches with no history, no backstory, no discipline to the storytelling, just throwing stuff up against the wall, justifying it with angles, or referring to shit that doesn't matter as backstory. I agree with you 100% if you're calling for more disciplined storytelling. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry for butchering your name, brother. I really am. Patrick White has become a YouTube member. Yay! Everybody give Patrick a big round of applause. Welcome to the family. And by the way, I try to post exclusive commentary to our videos to our members that only they get to see. It's on YouTube. You'll get notified if you hit your notification. You'll know about it. And right now, for the last few days, I've been documenting my 5-day water fast. And it's going great. But I go into great detail. I talk about things like autophagy and ketosis and states of euphoria. All of those things I talk about exclusively to our YouTube members. Now, I'm only going to be doing that 2 more times. I'm going to talk about it later today. I'll give everybody an update. And tomorrow, which is the last day of my fast. Yay, can't fucking wait. But yeah, being a YouTube member here at 83 weeks, you get some shit you don't expect. And I will be talking about more things wrestling related in that exclusive member commentary and videos. All kinds of fun stuff happening there. There's a rumor, I don't know, it's just a rumor at this point, that there may be, we'll call it a semi-daily news update that occurs every single morning. Well, not every single morning, almost every single morning, but a morning news update during the week talking about the news that developed late in the day or the night before, along with some other non-wrestling stuff mixed in just to keep it fun and interesting. Wacky shit. Wacky shit. A lot of wacky shit going on. Have you seen some of Dave Meltzer's posts lately? That motherfucker's off the rails. He's losing the shit. The wheels are wobbling. They haven't fallen off yet completely, but they're wobbling like a mucker feather. There's people calling him out on his bullshit. Oh my God. I'm going to talk about that more tomorrow on 83 weeks. As well as, by the way, I haven't touched on ratings because, well, the ratings aren't out yet for last night's show. And I think last night's show and my show here today, when the ratings come out for last night's show, we're going to get a pretty good indication whether my analysis and breakdown of the show is accurate or if I'm completely off the mark. I'm not normally in the mood to give predictions, mostly because I get bored with it, because when I predict something, I am right over 98% of the time. Now, that's where I'm at right now. I think I'm at like 98.225. Normally, I hover around that 93 and change percent category in terms of my predictions being right on the money. Like, for example, I predicted that Endeavor would end up being in the hunt for WWE. Back before anybody mentioned Endeavor, I called that shit. It's a fact. Called it. And then when it finally happened, it was like, ooh, that was interesting. But I'm usually right about things. And that's why I get bored with predicting things, because I'm right so often that it doesn't really challenge me. But I'm going to make an exception for you people. For you, I love all you people. I'm going to make an exception here and suggest that even with the overrun, I forgot to talk about that during the breakdown. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and predict that the average rating for the show, I'm going to call it 700,000. Could be a little more, could be a little less. I know I predicted months ago that WWE would be below 700 before May 15th. I've already been right once. I called it before anybody else did. I called it months, weeks before it happened. I gave a deadline, May 15th. I called it below 700,000, and bam, sure enough, it happened. Because I'm right as rain. It is what it is. But I'm going to throw out the number 700,000. I'm also going to suggest that Dax's match with Okada was boring enough and wasn't able to hold the audience that it probably did less than 20% of the first segment. Why does it matter? It matters because that's what the show is built around. It's your A story and your B story, as I talked about earlier. Maybe one of these days soon, very fucking soon, I'm going to sit down for an hour and we're going to talk about A, B, C, and D stories and how they're important and how to construct them over a 3-month arc. I may get my hands on a show Bible that breaks down the story arcs for all of the A, B, C, and D story talent over the course of 3 months for a major television network. Because I think I still have it. And I'll probably get sued or something like that for divulging it, because I don't know if I should or not, or could or not, or can or not. But fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway, because it will really help people understand what I'm talking about when I say A stories, B stories, D stories, or what a story arc really is. What does that mean, story arc? And what is an arc, and how does it apply to professional wrestling? These are all things that should be discussed. Nobody else is doing it. So it's incumbent upon me to enlighten you, the most enlightened audience I know of when it comes to professional wrestling, so that you can help enlighten me. I love that symbiotic kind of a relationship where everybody wins. It's awesome. All right, let's wrap them up. So I'm boring people to death. No, I'm not. You people love this shit, don't you? Tyler Dunn, do you think booking Roman similar to Sting in the NWO TakeOver, completely changing his character with the bloodline taking over, would be a wise choice? Thank you for using wise choice. Or let Roman continue to be himself? It's an option. It's one that I would certainly think about. But given the depth of potential in the bloodline storyline, because of the new people that are coming into it and the direction that it's taking, ever since the Hatfields and McCoys, fucking inter-family turmoil and conflict makes great entertainment. So there's a plethora. When was the last time you heard anybody use plethora in a podcast or a YouTube show? I beg to know. Please let me know if you do. But I think there's so much potential in Bloodline that I don't think it's a necessity. You know, the Sting storyline necessitated a change from what the character that Sting was pre-NWO to what he became as the Crow. The story actually defined the character because Sting was betrayed. He felt betrayed by people who were closest to him, which was the catalyst, the inciting incident, if you will, baby. The inciting incident to morph Sting from the previously bright, shiny object, high energy object character, you know what I mean, I'm just having fun, to this brooding, scary, almost morose, dangerous, brooding character. It was that character was defined by the story and the betrayal by his friends, Lex Luger, the Steiner brothers, everybody doubting Sting. Well, if you're Steve Borton, if you're Sting, I'm sorry. If you're Sting, it's like, you people know me. How could you even think or suggest that I could be guilty of the dastardly deed that I'm being accused of doing? That's what I mean by betrayal. That was the premise, if you will, of that story and that evolution of that character. Do I think that Roman needs that? I don't think so, because again, there's so much potential in the existing story. But it could be an interesting device to help accelerate that story or create more interest in it. But we're just going to have to wait to see how it plays out. But it's an option. This is so much fun. Thank you, guys. I mean that. I really have fun doing this. It's kind of cool. I'll be 69 years old at the end of this month. I'm in better shape now than I was when I was 40. I'm having a fucking blast. Life is good, folks. In no small part due to you guys and a great team of people that I get to work with doing this and the podcast and everything else I do. So thank you all very much. Demons Row, still stoked that I can message OG Eric. What do you think about Damian Priest? I like him a lot and I don't like how he's being booked. Do you think he'll be a star? I'm with you, man. I see something there. I can't honestly say I've watched him closely enough to determine whether he's being held back or used improperly. I don't like to use that term, used improperly, but usually it comes down to writing and scripting, or excuse me, writing and vision, and tactics and strategy in a way. But I agree that I see a lot of potential in him. I can't honestly comment on whether or not he's being written for or booked. I hate using the term too, booked properly, but I'll pay more attention because I do see a lot of potential in that character. But thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. I don't want to call you a demon. Jana or Jana or Jana. Either way, I'm thrilled to death you're here. You know, this is such a testicle festival. Every time I do something on social media or, you know, live podcasts or even over at ad-free shows. And we do have some hot women over there, some great women over there, some loyal fans over there. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to embarrass them. But for the most part, we're about 98% male audience, 25 to 49. Which I'm proud to have. Advertisers love them, which is why my life is so good right now. But if you keep up with TNA, what's your favorite thing about the product currently? Any storylines you're into? Would like to hear more of your TNA opinions going forward because I value your thoughts. And because I value you, Jana, Yana, because I value you, I am going to specifically put it on my calendar. I actually have a calendar now. I actually have someone, Evan Polisher, over at Ad Free Shows, who is managing my calendar so that I get the most out of every single day. Because I suck at that. I'm the most unorganized person you'll ever meet in your life. I get distracted by bright, shiny objects that you people wouldn't even begin to recognize. And I end up not getting the most out of every day. But I've changed that. I'm going to ask Evan Polisher to make sure that I put it on my calendar to watch and review next week's TNA show. So then I can not only give you an opinion because you were so kind to give us this super chat, I'm going to dig in and give you a real effort in analyzing that show. And I'll do a better job of answering that question next week, but I'm only doing it because you asked the question. So thank you very much. All right, we should be getting close here. Jason Sikorsky has become a YouTube member. And I am so grateful. But I mean that. I really am grateful. Nothing gets me more excited. I know this is going to sound like I don't have a life, but clearly I do have a life. I've got an amazing wife that I've been married to. I've been with for over 42 years. She's hot. I mean, she's gorgeous. And she's got a great personality. And she spends her time giving to others. Amazing woman. I have two amazing children that I'm so proud of. My daughter is vice president of development in a major television production studio in Los Angeles. My son is a very successful salesman in construction materials that are sold to people that build apartments and hotels and massive commercial buildings. He also donates a tremendous amount of his time to an organization called BACA, Bikers Against Child Abuse. I'm not going to talk a lot about that here because it's a long conversation, but my point is I have two amazingly successful, healthy children who are great human beings. And that's what I'm most proud of. I don't know how I got on this subject, but I did. But thank you. Thank you very much, because it's you and the family of people that are members here and over at Ad Free Shows and the people that just watch my stuff that really bring a lot of joy to my life. So to be at 69 years old, to be healthier than I was when I was 40, to have an amazingly attractive wife that I've been together with as long as I have, 42 years, the experiences that we've shared together, both in or as a result of the wrestling business and just in life in general. The fact that, got a fairly substantial net worth, not bragging, just is what it is. I'm having fun doing this. I've got a great life, and you guys are a big part of that. So thank you very much. All right, what else we got? Sane Sculler. I hate it when I don't get names right because it's kind of insulting and I don't mean it to be. Love your show. What's your favorite film and TV show? Oh, favorite film is so much. There's so many that I've loved over the years. Television, I'm a little. I don't go to movies a lot, but I'm really fascinated with the quality of television that you can get now on streaming platforms. Current note, there's a new series. I think it's on Apple. It's called Sugar with Colin Farrell. Fucking awesome. Awesome. The writing, the direction, the editing is phenomenal. I'm seeing new editing techniques that I've never seen before. Advancing story, different ways of doing it. And it's just fascinating. Highly encourage you to check out. I'm pretty sure it's on Apple. Sugar with Colin Farrell. You can thank me later. My favorite movie, if I had to pick one, I would say it's the movie that I've watched the most over the years, gone back and watched and rewatched and watched again and rewatched. Tombstone, Val Kilmer. Awesome movie. I love Westerns. That's just an awesome one. It's my go-to. Me and Garrett, when Garrett was a little kid, we used to watch it together. We still watch it together. He's 40 years old, and we still watch Tombstone anytime we're together. Kind of like a Christmas movie for us. All right, couple more, and then we're going to wrap it up.
That's
wait a minute.
That's it for all our questions.
Oh, I just saw a Dynamite rating. I'm not going to talk about it here. I'm going to save it. All I can say right now is tune into 83 Weeks tomorrow, because we're going to have the results of some of the polls that we've talked about here, and we're going to talk about the ratings. I'm going to leave you with this. First of all, I'm going to answer Mindy Elam's question because it's a super chat. I don't want to leave anybody hanging. It is, hi Eric. So I would like your opinion on, do you feel as if AEW is trying to mesh NWO and Evil Boss Vince? Personally, I feel like they're trying way too hard. I think, yeah, it's not working. Part of it is casting. I mean, look, the parallels to the NWO story are pretty obvious given what happened with Tony Khan, but it's so weak. It's so sad. It's so weak. You know, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Not so much in this case. Anyway, as far as leaving you, I'm going to leave you with one thing to look forward to in tomorrow's 83 Weeks and our discussion with ratings. Oh my God. So long, everybody. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow.